Good afternoon. I'm Tom Picasso, Networks Manager at Seek Common Ground, and welcome to our Seek Common Ground Learning Community Talk, A Walk in the Woods, Why It's Essential for Youth and Adults. I am joined today by Nicole Kennedy, a Certified Forest Therapy Guide and Wellness Coordinator at Hopewell Health Centers in Southeast Ohio, and Mary Macias, CEO and co-founder of Footpath Foundation, based in Cleveland and serving Northeast Ohio. You can learn more about Nicole and Mary's bios by clicking on them just right below here in the chat. They are joining us today to share their perspectives and experiences in leading programs that allow for both young people and adults to deepen their relationship to nature and benefit from the positive effects this relationship can have on mental health, community building, and academic performance, as well as the fostering of a more profound understanding of the self. For our talk today, Nicole and Mary will dialogue about their work for 20 minutes. Then we will have a discussant join for the next 20. Finally, to round out the hour, we'll stop the recording and invite those of you joining us live to have a truly off-the-record discussion. Like all of our talks, we will make today available on our website and YouTube channel within a week of this session. Our discussant today is Sandy Boyd, CEO of Seek Common Ground. She will reflect on Nicole and Mary's interview and ask questions. Throughout the talk, we encourage you to do this as well. Post your questions in the Q&A function, and we will get to those hopefully throughout the talk and in our overtime session. So as we jump in, I think I speak for all of us that the pandemic opened our eyes to the importance and benefits there are for taking a walk in the woods. Nicole and Mary, again, welcome. We first met both of you during the Whole Child Action Accelerator here at Seek Common Ground, which has a focus on social emotional learning. And at first, it didn't include nature-based wellness until you both came and led projects with us. So to start off, we know obviously some more, and we've gotten to do, I know, Nicole, some nature walks with you already. But for everybody else, tell us a little bit about your efforts and what inspired you to pursue this work. And maybe start off with you, Nicole.
Great, thank you, Tom. As Tom mentioned, I'm located in Southeast Ohio, and as you can see behind me, there's lots of beautiful, accessible nature. And in my previous career, I worked in infant early childhood mental health and spent a lot of time focusing on social emotional development, and came to learn about nature-based preschools and specifically forest bathing and mindfulness practice while being immersed in nature. And that was the start of my reconnection to nature as a support and something to be in relationship with. So I did some research on training and became a certified forest therapy guide. So now in this practice, I guide community members of all ages on forest therapy walks, which are really slow, intentional, sensory-based walks in nature with the intention to deepen connection and relationship with the natural world. And we'll talk lots about the benefits of engaging in that type of practice during our talk.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. And Mary.
Hi, I'm the Executive Director of Footpath Foundation. Our mission at Footpath is to connect kids with nature to develop personal growth and improve access to the natural world. And my journey is a bit winding, but I'll be brief. I'm a child advocate who works for children's rights, and I actually began my work as an attorney and then moved into the nonprofit field, working for the largest foster care and adoption agency in Michigan at the time. And then in the year 2000, I was part of taking a group of children from Detroit to northern Michigan to an overnight camp. And from the moment the kids started complaining when the van windows were rolled down and we were driving down the camp road, I knew we were onto something. And after the 3 days at camp, I saw how significant the change was for the kids who had never had the chance to experience nature in any kind of way, let alone an overnight 3-day immersive trip. So I was convinced that all children needed outdoor opportunities because it was life-changing. And then fast forward to 2015, I co-founded Footpath Foundation. And in the summer of 2016, we took our first group of 48 kids from the Boys and Girls Club of Cleveland at the time to overnight camp. It was hugely successful and impactful. And again, we saw kids trying new things, making new friends, overcoming fears, all the benefits that we will talk more about, as Nicole mentioned. And from there, we've just been growing and expanding our programming ever since. We now have school-based programs for 5th and 6th graders. We have after-school programs, summer camps, outdoor adventures, and even equestrian therapy. So that's where we are today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. Well, opening up a dialogue, I wanted to just ask, what makes what you both do different than just going outside? You know, so often we hear, I mean, I grew up and it'd be like, hey, go play outside, go away, and we hear that a lot, right? Like, hey, just go outside, just go be in nature. What makes what you do different? What elevates it? What is your approach? Yeah. And whoever wants to start.
I can start.
Yeah.
I think just going outside is a great beginning point, and often an entry point for people who maybe aren't as comfortable for something like a walk that I would offer. But what makes forest therapy walks different is the element of being guided by somebody else. And a guide on a forest therapy walk is really intentional in how they set up the natural environment to welcome participants in. We really intend to make the walk accessible for all comfort levels. We know that nature can be an unknown for many people who maybe haven't had exposure, or maybe they have and it's still not comfortable. So a guide is there to offer lots of hospitality as they're walking through the forest and to offer prompts. We call them invitations that are sensory by nature. So an invitation might sound like, wander out and explore the textures of this place using your senses. And I might even scaffold that a little, like, what does it feel like to reach out and touch a tree? Something that to me has come to feel very comfortable, but may need a little more support from a guide for others. I think it's also different in the focus on relationships. We often think of going outside as recreation, maybe even exercise or something challenging like a hike or kayaking. But the focus of a walk is really slow and mindful and rooted in building relationships between people, the natural part of themselves, and the land that they're on. So I think in essence of that experience that a guide offers makes it a little deeper than being outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nicole, I have to agree with you. I think sometimes because we're serving children who typically wouldn't have access to nature or an outdoor experience of any type, our goal is just to get outside. And so sometimes, that is the goal or part of the goal. And then from there, our programming is always structured around the needs of our kids. So we always have that in mind. So our programming is very mindful and purposeful for them, whether it's a school group or, that we're focused on communication skills while being outside, or teamwork, or an after school program where we're focused on mindfulness. We really have to start with getting the kids outside and overcoming some barriers and logistics there, and then providing space for the kids to experience those things for the first time. So, Nicole, you mentioned comfort level, and that's something we take very seriously because for many of them, for instance, I remember hiking with a kid, his name is David, he was 10. And when we walked off the concrete onto a trail, he stopped walking and he said, "Whoa, this feels so weird under my feet." And I looked down and I said, what's wrong? And he said, "It just feels weird." And I looked down and saw dirt, some rocks, and like some tree roots. So for him, that experience of stepping off of concrete onto dirt, onto a trail, was an entire experience. So sometimes that goal is just being outside. And I think then what makes us different is giving those opportunities to kids that normally wouldn't have them, as well as the structured programming that we provide in our programs once we get them outside.
I'd like to go deeper into then, what are some of the other barriers that you have seen both kids and adults have when given the opportunity to go out into nature? And then on the other side of it, right, whether it's a guided walk or going out on some of the day or longer programming that you have, Mary, what are some of the benefits that you've seen in folks, both maybe in individual, like the story you shared, Mary, or also in the community, or even with academics?
Yeah, and Nicole, I think we have similar but different barriers, probably because we have different audiences. I don't know if you would agree with that. What kind of barriers do you face? Because I could start listing them, but we should talk about the different audiences, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm in a predominantly rural area. So access to nature is definitely abundant. I think maybe the way that nature is viewed in our community sometimes might be, I don't know if I would use barrier, but maybe different or like edgy for people. Um, our region and community has experienced a lot of extraction and kind of nature viewed as a resource, something that is used or used for labor and livelihood workforce versus maybe relationship. So I think for some groups, it's a new idea to think of it that way. So that can feel a little edgy or different. But I have found all in all, people are really open to hearing more. I think weather can sometimes be a barrier that goes back to comfort level of when do people want to be outside and for how long. And also, even though we have a lot of accessible nature, transportation can still be an issue, especially if you're talking about kiddos that need an adult to navigate that with them if it's outside of their immediate living space. So yeah, those are a few things that I think are more maybe edges that we come against. And surprisingly, people that, again, just aren't as comfortable with being outdoors. So we really try to give options in our invitations of this is open and adaptable, do what feels good to you in this experience, and leave what doesn't. And some people will lean into the edginess of not being used to being outdoors or touching trees, and others might be more reserved and just walk the way that they choose to.
That makes sense. Transportation is also a barrier for us. It's actually a huge barrier for us. And like you said, it's greatly because we work with kids, but it's the kids also are coming from areas that are struggle. They're very low income urban areas. So transportation is a barrier for their families as well. And race is a barrier for us, as well as income levels. You mentioned that maybe someone wouldn't be available to, say, drive a kid to a park or to a green space. And we find that too, if your income level is, you're working 2 or 3 jobs, you don't maybe have the ability to figure out how to get on a bus and get somewhere else, or you don't have the time. So those are barriers, as well as safety. And race is a barrier. We still have kids asking us when we take them to local parks, metro parks, national park that's near us. We still have kids asking us, am I allowed to be here? Or is this free? Am I allowed to bring my grandpa back here? Right. So there is still those barriers for us as well, to name a few, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, so then what are some of the specific, you both have mentioned through your programming, again, it goes back to that relationship piece, right? Like building a relationship to nature, building a relationship to what it can offer back. I hear, what happens on the other side? You finish a walk, you finish a day of programming. What have you gotten to see in the folks that you've worked with? And it can be like I know we shared some singular stories, but like, what effect have you seen it have? Because I think when it comes to this idea of going outside, be one with nature, it can feel, like we've all said, like intimidating, and also like, well, I also don't know like how to even start, right? So having guides, I feel like, is a part of this, but being guides, both guides yourselves, and I know we have some guides on watching today. Like, what have you seen once you've guided folks through an experience outside? Like, what are the benefits that you have just seen manifest?
Wow, so many. I'll try to keep it
Yeah.
brief so Mary has a chance. It's really amazing to me how nature shows up for each person in their own unique way. So a walk is usually a group experience, and I'm offering the same invitations to the group, but they each receive something different. So I'll share a kid example and then an adult example. On my first walk guiding all children, there was an invitation about befriending a being, finding a tree or some natural being to introduce yourself to and explore. And I was a little nervous, honestly, first time guiding kids. There's a lot of other factors that roll into it, but they just get it. Like kids are so sensory in nature and in their being. I forgot, like, wow, I'm reconnecting with that part of myself as an adult, but it never left them, or at least not yet, and hopefully not ever. And so this little girl went out, found a tree, and in the group we have sharing time. And they were just so excited, and she jumped in and gave her tree a name and called it a friend and was sharing, my friend had moss at the bottom and this type of bark, and its leaves were green and yellow. And I'm just receiving this feedback. And as we venture further down the trail, she pauses and says, and my tree had a really good personality. And that's what you want in a friend. And it evolved into this whole like social skill conversation with a being or object that many people would just see as kind of dormant, and but they are sentient beings that offer relationship. And she was working on a plan with her mom to go back and visit her tree because she was going to miss it. And it was just a really good message that nature is another level of support that we can have give and take with and feel comfort from. So yeah, that was a good kid example. I'll keep my adult one brief.
Yeah.
I recently guided a group of women from an inpatient recovery program. And in the final share, a woman said, I think I found my first sober hobby of being outside. And I don't think she meant, coming on all of my walks or being guided. She meant immersing herself in the outdoors as a sober person, and described how that was different than her outdoor experiences prior to her recovery journey. So that was like the highlight of my career. But yeah, landed very differently across ages and for those two people. I would love to hear about yours, Mary, because this is
Those
like
are great stories.
yeah.
Those are great stories, Nicole. And I bet we see similar benefits, because we can talk about the overall benefits that we know. We know it decreases stress and anxiety. We know it increases, mental health and physical health. And there are a lot of things we can list, the benefits, but those stories are so meaningful and powerful because we actually get to see it happen. And, we see kids tell us things like, I feel so at home. I'm happy. I feel free. I feel excited. They, like you said, they are very much ready to experience what we're opening up for them during these opportunities. And they also are learning about themselves. So there's a lot of personal growth that we see. And it's almost like you can see it happening while we're outside. And sometimes kids are even good at verbalizing it by saying things. We took a kid to overnight camp, and he was really good at archery. He had never, obviously he'd come from the inner city. He had never had the chance to experience using a bow and arrow, and he kept hitting the target. And he turned around with this big smile and he said, well, now I know I'm good at something.
Oh.
And we looked at him puzzled, and he said, well, all the kids play basketball at home. That's all we do. And I'm really bad at basketball and they make fun of me all the time. But now I know I'm good at something. So he was able, I don't know that he'll ever have that opportunity again, but he will never forget how he felt. And it's just one example. It doesn't have to be archery. It's just kids need the opportunity to be outside, to discover things about themselves, to try new things, to swim in the lake for the first time, or to try canoeing when they're terrified, and having the chance to overcome fears, even if it's walking in the woods, which is fearful for our kids. And as you mentioned, Nicole, people can be very uncomfortable with that. So giving them the opportunity to spend that time outside and those benefits just come flowing. I mean, it really is amazing and very evident when you're outside with kids to see the benefits of nature. And we do know that spending time outside in and of itself has benefits regardless of what they're doing. We see improved cognitive function and brain activity, improved behavior. In the classroom, we see more engagement, more curiosity, and the ability to think more critically. And so there are a lot of benefits.
Yeah, and I want to jump in, Mary, because I'd like to bring up our discussant today, because I think you're hitting on a lot of points about how this can go into the classroom and further. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce here Sandy Boyd, our CEO at Seek Common Ground, to be our discussant today, to reflect a little bit on what we've been discussing so far. So take it over to you, Sandy.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here today, and it's so good to see both of you. I especially appreciate, Nicole, that you are actually literally outside. That was smart. I just want to remind everybody who's listening today that you should feel free to go ahead and add questions to the chat or to the Q&A, and we will try to work them in now or get to them in the overtime session. But do feel free to go ahead and post any questions you've got. Yeah, Mary, it would be great if you and Nicole maybe can just sort of pick up on that last point about the benefits to the kids you've seen in, we talked about social emotional learning, mental health, but you just mentioned academics, and I think that's of interest too, right? When we met you both doing this Whole Child Action Accelerator in Ohio. So just interested to know like what you know and what you've seen about the benefits of your work for kids.
Yeah, so our school-based programs are very exciting because they're showing the benefits. The teachers are reporting the benefits as well as the students. So teachers are telling us, hey, this is working. This is working really well. Kids are engaging and they go outside to do some work. And even when they come back inside, they're more engaged. They want to learn. They're excited about what they're learning. So we're sort of reigniting the passion for curiosity and for education. And that's very important, especially as we see the attendance at the schools we serve decreasing. It really has, attendance has been an issue, especially since 2020 with COVID. So seeing an increase in attendance on the days that they know they get to go outside, improved higher standardized test scores. And actually, I did want to share an article from Frontier Psychology that really discusses the importance of spending time outside and the benefits to education. But we see it, the kids report it. We do collect data and the kids report decrease in stress, decrease in anxiety. The teachers report observing better classroom behavior. And so the benefits that are being studied and reported on in the literature are true. And it's exciting to see that happening in real life.
Yeah, I would agree. And another reference for more kid-related information would be Richard Louv's website. I included it in the resource list, but he has a book called Last Child in the Woods, which I think of as a really great collection of research behind the idea of nature deficit disorder and considering it in the context of overdiagnosis of ADHD amongst kids and how childhood indoors looks different. But I would also add, I mean, I've done walks with children, but I would say most of my practice so far has been with adults, but those adults have been educators and caregivers that also need reprieve from stress and demands on their cognition and attention. And there are two really great foundational theories that I like to reference that I learned in my training. One is stress restoration theory, and the other is attention restoration theory. And they both highlight what I think we already know in ourselves, that exposure to nature, whether you're immersed in it or even they found just looking at pictures of nature or green spaces, has the capacity to restore mental fatigue and help us attend and focus. And that can be true for children and adults. So it's just great to think of how it extends from childhood and classroom to really community wellness and how we can collectively immerse ourselves.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I'm glad you brought that up. I think you both mentioned the pandemic, and I have in my head, and you should correct me if I'm wrong, that the interest in what you're doing, what both of you are doing, really increased during the pandemic. And I wondered if you could talk more about kind of the demand or interest or what you're seeing in your communities with respect to like wanting to take more advantage of these opportunities.
Oh, we definitely saw an increase. And I think it helped. It's strange to say that a pandemic helped, but it helped to bring the awareness, because instead of, I don't know if you found this, Nicole, but instead of us needing to educate people about how it will feel when they go outside, they started going outside themselves and finding that it helped them to feel better. So instead of quoting a study or telling someone to read about it or, trust me, just go do it, they were finding themselves going for a walk around the block or standing out on their porch for a second, right? Because it was safe, and then it sort of caught on, like, oh, I do feel better. My mental health and my physical health often are improving because I'm spending time outside. So I definitely saw demand increase. Did you, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, my journey started during the pandemic. So I think for me, it was very personal in the beginning. I don't mind sharing that I was in a very stressful administrative role and took a leave from work to focus on my own mental health and well-being during the pandemic, and just felt this pull of I need to be outside. Like something has got to be there for me to help me regulate. And once I was a little further on the other side of that journey and focusing on my own healing, then I noticed all of the research, like the trends that were going up in like camping gear. It was like sold out everywhere, kayaks and bikes. And I think part of that was the force of we can't congregate in groups. We can't do that inside. Outside offers maybe a little more flexibility and safety to do those things. So I think it was almost like a collective remembering of, hey, we are biologically in tune with nature. We are nature. What does it feel like to remember and reconnect with that natural part of ourself? And forest bathing actually originated in Japan in the 80s during a tech boom, when the population was forced to spend more time indoors through tech-based industry, right? And they saw it then. The health outcomes were not great, and they started this forest bathing public service campaign to get people back outside. So I think we as a culture in various ways go through this cycle of reconnecting with nature and then getting too far away from it. And there's definitely some balance and middle ground. And I think something like the pandemic offers an incredible level of threat to our being and our community. And when we're operating out of that stress response of our brain, we're biologically prone to go back to food, water, shelter. And where did those things come from for us as humans? They originated in nature. As human beings, we have spent more time living outdoors than indoors, which is like kind of hard to think about because that hasn't been experienced in my lifetime. But when you look at it collectively, it makes sense. So I think it's very layered in terms of how we got here through the pandemic, but it makes a lot of sense and seems like something so simple that shouldn't always need explained. But when we get removed from it, those reminders are helpful.
Yeah, I think when we remember that currently 93% of our time on average is spent indoors or in a car, and the statistic right now is that 7 to 8 hours a day are spent in front of a screen on average, and 3 to 7 minutes are spent outside. Like, certainly the pendulum has swung, right, Nicole? Like, we are inside right now, and we need to start trying to find our way back outside.
Oh, thank you for those comments. I think one thing the pandemic revealed, because I think I think you're both pointing to this too, was sort of under the surface the whole time, right? But the sort of stress and mental health needs and all of the other things that the pandemic like really revealed, and that you, because of the kind of work you were doing, the opportunity to be outside, to participate in your programs because they were safer during COVID. And I'm wondering, not that I know what stage of the pandemic we're in right now, but I'm wondering, as we are, hopefully, coming out of the pandemic, what your work can offer to folks to sort of address these needs, which I think are so critical, and that maybe for the first time that I can remember, schools, policymakers, folks are really sort of understanding that, that we, both kids and adults, have these needs that have been unmet, whether they're social, emotional, mental health, whatever. So I'm just curious about where you see this work going in the future, the demand for it going forward, that sort of thing.
I would just say that I think the demand is just increasing. I don't think it will go away, because I think that we have shown what the benefits are. Like, I think that people have been able to experience it and see what's happening. So for instance, we now have teachers and principals calling us and saying, you're the answer. You've been helping our kids recover from the pandemic, and we see now the importance of your programming and of being outside. So we want you in our schools, and they're talking to each other. And so I think systematically the need will grow, and it will not disappear, because we've kind of had the chance to prove ourselves a little bit. But that's, on a larger scale, I'm hoping, maybe Nicole, you have insight into this, that the person will have the same experience. Like I have as a person had the opportunity. I don't know. What do you think, Nicole?
Yeah, I think in any essence, if we've experienced a level of stress or trauma, there requires a level of support and state of regulation to like truly feel it and process it in whatever way works for us. And even though the Forest Therapy Walk, it has therapy in the name, it's not intended to be a processing place, but it definitely opens up a state of sensory embodiment, safely held by a guide, where people can feel more open and vulnerable to like truly feeling in the moment. And I think during the pandemic, that was really challenging for a lot of us, because we're trying to make things like keep functioning and going. We're in this quick like problem solving. How do we adapt our whole life to keep moving forward? And now we're left with the leftover, right? How do we sit with that and be with that? What do we keep from all the changes we have made, and what do we let go of that no longer serves us? And I've enjoyed walks where people can, one, slow down their mind and their body to really just be with no agenda. And there are really common themes that show up for people in mindful nature time. And one of the biggest ones is grief and loss. And it's really neat to see how people can experience that. There might be tears shed, or there might be moments shared on a walk related to grief and loss, pandemic wise or other, and it still be a positive experience at the end, if that makes sense. So I think there's power in nature letting us kind of release those emotions or stressors that we often carry with us for far too long. That nature can be a witness. And if you feel safe in a group, whether it's on an educational walk or a mindful walk, you can not only have nature as a witness, but be in community with other people who are having a similar experience to you in that moment in time.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to go back to something that both of you said kind of earlier on about kind of the comfort level of both kids and adults that you've had in these experiences. And I want to talk just a little bit, or sort of pose this question that actually came through in a question yesterday that we got ahead of time. And that is, I assume that you both have also had plenty of folks who saw what you were doing or heard what you were doing and were somewhat skeptical. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the skeptics and how you address that. And maybe as importantly, you're doing something different, and you're doing something, maybe it's not so different. You've both sort of said that, but you sort of in our space, it's different. It sounds different. And how do you approach funders, and what do funders think about what you're doing, and how, given, you know, sort of the traditional metrics and everything that we all sort of deal with, you know, how do you continue to do your work and build on your work kind of in this environment? And maybe I shouldn't assume there's skepticism, but I'm curious about that. Like, how do people think about your work, and are you finding, you know, acceptance? And I think that's true also maybe in schools too, right? It sounds like there, you know, once people do it, there's been really positive responses, but curious about skeptics and funders. And pretty soon Tom's going to tell us we don't have that much time left. So I'm sorry to leave you with such a big question.
Great question though.
I was going to say, Cindy, that's a lot. That's a lot.
I know, sorry. We can talk more about that in overtime, but maybe if you could just kind of give us some quick thoughts about that.
I'll just say quickly, I think with skeptics, once you start, if you can get their attention for a minute and then start to tell the story, they may listen better. And if you can connect it to them personally, that helps, right? Like, have you ever been stressed out and then you had to go walk your dog or something? You know, guess what? After you walked around the block, how did you feel? And they usually, well, I felt better. And you're like, yeah, you did feel better, right? So it's, you know, if you can break it down to something a little bit smaller so they can feel it. And then as far as funders go, I think it's important that we do collect data, and we are able to illustrate and show the benefits and the progress that we're making, and that the programming is purposeful. We also meet other needs of the kids. We, like, for instance, our school programs meet educational standards, and then also meet social emotional standards and get kids outside, right? So by making the programming all-inclusive and as helpful to educators as possible, that's helpful for that piece, for those funders, definitely. And then, you know, working with the funders to see, do your priorities align, and showing them yes, they do. And here's why. Maybe you thought it didn't, maybe because we are newer in the field of, you know, we're not music. Music is amazing and powerful, and people know that. So sports, people know that. Now we're trying to fit in nature, like, add that to the list. There's a comma, nature. Even though it should be all the time, we know we're not there yet. So
great. Nicole?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Mary said. I mean, storytelling always, and that's been a part of our journey through Seek Common Ground as well. And experiencing it. Like, I've just offered to people, like, do you want to come with me and try it out? Like, let's do a trial run at your park and see how it would go. And I think that is powerful. Like, once they have their own story to connect it to, it can make all of the difference.
Great. Yeah, we're going to continue this in overtime, because I think these are such good topics. And first off, final question for everyone though, round robin. Who is a real life contemporary hero to you? And we'll go ahead and start with Sandy.
Oh, I want to go last.
Okay, go last. I'll go right over here to Nicole.
Oh, wow. Okay. A real life hero. Oh gosh. I guess I'll just mention Richard Louv again because I already talked about him previously, but I have so many tabs in the book of things I've highlighted and marked because I think he does a really nice job of translating this to what it means for children and communities.
Mary.
I'm going to say Michael Williams. He was the executive director at the foster care and adoption agency that I worked at. So although it's not a nature-based person, not specific to nature, he taught me always to advocate for what's best for the child and not to be shy about asking for what you need in order to make that child's life better. And that he was an insanely great model for always pushing forward for what's best.
Sandy.
All right, I wanted to go last because my answer is going to be, it's going to seem cheesy, but it's not cheesy. And that is, I have been constantly impressed over the past couple of years with the people that we've met through the Ohio Whole Child Action Accelerator work, the people that are actually on the ground doing what you're doing, Nicole, Mary, all the other folks that have actually helped students and families like during this incredibly stressful and difficult time, not just survive it, but really thrive. And a lot of people talk about doing the work, but I think anybody who's actually doing that, and that includes the two of you, you guys are real life heroes.
Well, wow, Sandy. Very kind.
Yeah, well, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead, Mary.
No, that was very kind, Sandy. Thank you.
I mean, I thought I had traveled a long way from being a lawyer to doing what I'm doing, but to do what you're doing, Mary, wow, amazing. And you too, Nicole.
Takes a team.
Absolutely.
Nicole and Mary, I just want to thank you so much. You are guides through nature, but you really guided us today in this discussion as well through your work and what having a relationship to nature can give and be. So for those of you joining us live, the discussion is going to continue. So please stay on for an off-the-record discussion with Nicole, Mary, and Sandy. And we'll invite you to ask your questions, and we're just going to keep this going. But a quick note, we're back on November 17th at 2 p.m. with another talk on innovative research methods hosted by my colleague, Michael Gilligan. Look for an upcoming email invitation from us. Please forward that along to your networks, and we'll have a registration link here available as well. So you can find more Seek Common Ground Learning Community Talks on our YouTube channel, as well as on our Seek Common Ground website at seekcommonground.org. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and we will see you all soon. And we'll see those of you joining us live in the overtime. Thanks, everybody.